as you experience this rapid growth, how did you manage to preserve and uphold your company's culture?
We were just very patient. In some cases, we had to slow down growth, tell clients that, we were running a wait list and we couldn't take on any more work because we were still hiring. And it was more important to us to grow slower and smart than fast and reckless.
Hello, everyone. I'm Farron, your host for another exciting episode of Beyond the Ping Pong Table. And today we have a very special guest joining us. This remarkable individual holds a unique place in my entrepreneurial journey as my very first business partner during our college years. Throughout his life, he's been a serial entrepreneur with ventures that trace all the way back to his childhood. Most notably, he's been at the helm of a company recognized as the #2 best place to work. And presently, he's the co-founder and CEO of Digital Detox. Our guest today, Forrest Bronzan, is here to share his wealth of experience discussing both the highs and lows of building award-winning company cultures with his relentless ambition and dedication. Forrest is truly one of the most inspiring individuals I've had the privilege of knowing. So welcome, Forrest.
Thanks for having me, Farron. Excited for today.
So you founded Email Aptitude back in 2011, correct?
It's a little bit fuzzy on when it started. I started consulting for a bit and then eventually it evolved into EA, probably circa 2013 or so.
Got it. Okay. Well, this was a time when workplace culture wasn't as widely discussed as it is today. So could you share kind of the origin story of Email Aptitude and walk us through the evolution and growth over the years to the time it was acquired?
Yes, a lot to unpack there. And, I was working at an agency in San Diego running CRM and loyalty, and amazing culture, loved it. It was probably my favorite job, living with my best friend since kindergarten. And then I met a girl and moved for the girl, and she was in residency, and I had no job. So I started consulting and had always been passionate about database and loyalty and CRM. And it just kind of snowballed. We picked up one client, picked up another client, hired our first employee remotely out of Romania and then remotely locally. And it just ended up growing. At time of exit, we were a little over 100 full-time, managing over 100 enterprise brands around the world. And we just had a blast. So what's interesting though is we started remote, a fully remote company. And this was back, 2013, 2014, when it was taboo to work remote. And people would talk to me, say like, you're a little crazy letting your employees work remote. How do you do that? And that's never going to be a thing. So we were very early on the remote side. And it's kind of funny watching a lot of the debates now on, should we do remote? Should we force people to come in the office? And I have a lot of opinions on that. But yeah, so we started and it was all organic. We didn't have an outbound sales team, no funding, no debt. And we just grew organically from working hard and being ourselves and earning trust with clients, and eventually made it to the top and exited. And that's a whole nother culture story we could unpack as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So why was remote important? Was that just because of the nature of how it was growing, or?
Yeah, well, so my wife was in residency in Loma Linda in Redlands, and it's about 60 miles east of LA. So there's not a ton of talent there. So just out of necessity, we had to be remote. And then eventually we moved shop to San Francisco, where we had a lot of access to talent. But since we started remote, we had this really good vibe, and folks were productive and they liked the flexibility, everything that we hear about now, but it was just very raw and genuine then. And we got to a point where we needed to hire, very quickly. I mean, we were scaling at a really, really fast clip. And to get that kind of talent at, the rates that we could afford, like we couldn't just hire in San Francisco. And we started experimenting with different little pockets, Portland, Chattanooga, Tennessee, different areas around the country. And we found just these remarkably talented, wholesome individuals that were just perfectly aligned. And it's hard to explain that, but it's not like necessarily the LA, New York, San Francisco work ethic and work vibe. It's a little bit different, and they just completely meshed. And we eventually had these little pockets. We had an office in Tennessee. We were about to open an office in Portland before we got acquired. And yeah, so part of it was out of necessity, just finding the right talent, and then also just being open-minded. I think if a company is based in one spot, even if you're in a major hub, New York or LA, it's hard to find everything you need just in that one spot. You need to branch out. You need to be open-minded to, get the best talent. And at the end of the day, we were all about, we want to get the best talent that are going to have a ton of fun and really align with our mission. And we don't really care where you're at in the world, as long as you get the job done and are committed to growing and evolving with us.
How did you manage to preserve and uphold your company's culture?
Yeah, so the culture definitely evolved, and one of the key hires we had was an HR manager. I think he was employee 30, 31 or so, and a lot of folks wait. A lot of companies will wait until maybe 50, 60, 70 employees before hiring a full time dedicated HR manager. And
Mhm.
I don't even like the term HR manager. He was more of a culture ambassador, business partner, if you will.
Yeah.
Joey Owens Barham, he's phenomenal, and he was pivotal, not only in terms of scale, how can we grow fast, but also how do we think more organizationally and structurally about how we want to define culture and how we want that to evolve. It's one thing when you're 10 people, and it's another thing when you're 100 or 200 or 500 people to have that consistency. And
Mhm.
we were just very diligent in the hiring process to make sure folks were there. We rarely looked at resumes. We looked at talent, background, and ultimately, like, would you be a good fit? Could we see ourselves spending a lot of time with you? You spend so much time with your work colleagues, more than your spouse and family in some cases, that was more important to us than resume, background, and education. Is, are we going to enjoy our time together? And that was our first litmus. And we were also very disciplined at weeding out if we made a hiring mistake, which occasionally we did, and to nip that quickly, right? If you have poison in the well, that could just completely damage a company, especially if it's in the first 10, 15 employees.
So you must have experienced a lot of highs and lows in this process. Can you share maybe a story or lesson learned or?
Yeah, so I would have hired an assistant early on. I think too many founders wait too long to hire a personal assistant. That would be my number three hire on a next venture, right? And
Okay.
on
Yeah.
this one, that was number three. And would have hired the HR manager maybe even a little bit earlier, 2025, if you are really foreseeing strong growth. So those weren't necessarily mistakes, but just in hindsight, would have bumped those up a little bit. But we were still ahead of the curve. Again, like full time HR manager at 30. Most folks aren't doing that. I think I think it was just a balance of, and we did a decent job of this, but turning down work versus maintaining a flow of talent coming in. And I think one thing on the remote side that is challenging is for someone it's like this is their first or second job out of college, right? And so if you're greener and you haven't had that in office environment, that's a challenge. So we put a lot of time into developing resources and support for newer hires, and
Mhm.
eventually that kind of became more of a litmus in the hiring process. We found just through a lot of our trial and error that uh, someone that's more successful at remote is someone that has already had in person an office experience because they've
Right.
developed just some of those soft skills. And
Yeah.
if it's someone that's just green right out of college, they need that interaction and that kind of more hands-on training.
Mhm.
And it worked. We had several that were wildly successful, but we had a couple that struggled there, and ultimately it wasn't a good fit. And we cheered them on, told them to, we helped them find a kind of in-person job until they could kind of develop some of those skills. One thing we learned that worked really well, though, so even though we were remote, we would try at least 2 to 3 times a year to have people face to face. So in some cases, that would be usually twice a year. We would do a company-wide complete meetup, a holiday party, and then a different time of year. But then we would also try to rotate and cycle people through where every quarter they were flying to some hub, even if it wasn't the full company, but meeting up with a group of 10 other colleagues. And I wish we had started that earlier because that was so powerful, having just that face-to-face connection. So while
Mhm.
remote is awesome, I think in a perfect world, if you could have that human connection, it's going to be even stronger. In our case, it worked out because this was before a lot of the issues of remote work that you see now. I think folks have gotten a little lazy and they've abused it.
Mhm.
But before, they really appreciated it and were grateful for the opportunity. And so they worked really hard. They're really passionate. And then when we came together, it's kind of like if you're in a long distance relationship and you see your partner, whatever it is, once a week, once a month, that's meaningful time. And so when we all came together as a company or in a small pod, it was really
Mhm.
meaningful. And then you go back recharge. So to answer your question, I wish we would have started that earlier. I think it was, I don't know, by employee 30 or 40, we started being more disciplined with that. And I wish we would have started that from day one, having more in-person interaction.
A lot of companies are doing that. I know I actually end up getting hired sometimes to come out and capture those events because they're really great collaborations and just getting out of the office, or in some cases, I guess I've even had companies that were completely distributed and didn't have a home office. So I totally see the value in that. Can you talk about maybe like some of the events that you would organize around those offsites?
Yeah. So our the two annual company events a year. That our annual holiday party was legendary. We'd
Okay.
do just go all out at an amazing restaurant or venue, bring your spouses. We'd fly in spouses. It'd be like a 3-day event. And
Yeah.
those were really, really special, just some really great connection. And then for 3 years or so, we took the whole company to Camp Grounded, Digital Detox's summer camp for adults. So there was zero work talk, zero technology. You can't use your real name. And so we got folks really uncomfortable and outside of their comfort zone, but they ended up just having lifelong memories and experiences. So if it was a year that we weren't doing camp, it would be some other meetup where it's a little bit more formal, where the holiday party is more fun. We'd have, some other workshopping or meetup. And then the small quarterly ones that just would kind of depend on the individual. A lot of times, we were growing a pretty large design team. And so they'd all want to go to this design conference and stay an extra couple of days to powwow. Or we'd bring folks in after, some key client meetings in New York and stay an extra 2 days to have some in-person time. So it kind of just depend on the pod.
Nice. Well, since you brought up Digital Detox Camp, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Digital Detox, it's kind of a long, beautiful story. My dear friend Levi, I went to middle school with him. He started the company in 2012, kind of around the time I was starting this. And he was just building this beautiful brand and speaking around the world and building this movement to have folks a little bit more mindful with how they spend time with tech. And he died of a brain tumor in 2017 at 32. So the company went on hiatus for a few years. I had sold my previous agency, and then I took it over 2020 right before COVID. And so we had, global events sold out and waitlisted, and then COVID shut us down. So yeah, from a company culture perspective, it's just apples and oranges. It's very, very different, right? So, where before, we were a digital agency, largely younger demographic and all kind of digital marketers and creatives. And now Digital Detox, we work with mental health professionals and educators and camp counselors. So it's a lot of different personalities in the mix, which is beautiful. It's an interesting dynamic to navigate from a leadership perspective. And how do we line our head psychiatrist with our head of content creation, who are in completely different worlds. Whereas at my previous agency, everyone was at least in the same town, metaphorically speaking. So, but no, it's great. DD, we're focused a lot on, we're not anti-tech, we're not anti-social media, but we try to help folks just have a little bit more balance, do a lot of work with schools, teens, and parents to ultimately tackle this really, really big challenge that's impacting the globe.
Is there any common mistakes you've seen in organizations that they're doing as in the realm of workplace culture, or elements you think that are overlooked?
Yeah, so a couple things, and this isn't necessarily a problem, but just the nature of a lot of fast growth shops that have funding, they have to hire so quick that for example, if you have a core group of 50 and all of a sudden you get 30 million in funding and you have to go from 50 to 500 overnight, sometimes literally, like that's almost impossible to maintain that raw organic culture. And I think funded startups are focused so much on top line and growth that the culture is meaningful for them, and they recognize the mental health impacts and the other business impacts, but it's not a primary driver, right? When I started my previous company, I just wanted to create a best places to work. I wanted to create a family and community that I liked going to work with. We just happened to be good at CRM and loyalty, but the primary was creating this great company culture and community. Whereas most companies, it's a completely different goal. It's, we want to get the biggest we can, we get acquired, we want to go public, whatever it is, and we have to figure out culture along the way. But I think one of the challenges is when you're growing so fast, it all of a sudden it's just a different dynamic. It's hard to maintain. That's one. I think two, and we could talk about mergers and acquisitions. I think that's a completely different beast that most founders have no idea what they're in for when you're merging two companies together and trying to fuse in two different cultures. It's a good problem to have, right? It's a very good problem to have to navigate that, but it's definitely something I don't think gets a lot of attention, partly because, in the big scheme of, with the number of companies out there and the number of, meaningful mergers and acquisitions, it's much fewer and far between, but it definitely creates some complex issues.
Do you want to go into some of those?
Yeah, sure. So I think the analogy, I was talking to someone the other day on this, think of, you have like two families, right? So the Tabrizi family and the Bronzan family, two very amazing families, creative, awesome, good, wholesome people, right? If we get together for a family reunion, we merge our family reunions, that would probably work okay, right? We'd have a couple days together. There'd be some differences. Okay, one family wants to get out to activities early. The other wants to just lounge by the pool, but it would function. But if you take two families and they might be great, great cultures, and you then say, let's all move together in a compound and live together. That's when challenges come up, right? You have two, no one's right or wrong, but one family eats breakfast at 6, the other eats breakfast at 10. You just go about things differently. And so when you have a merger acquisition, and you have, I think it's a bigger challenge when you have two very, very unique and strong cultures, because then they start to butt heads, and it's impossible to have 100% alignment, right? There's always going to be something little that someone does differently, and then egos get in play. So I think it's a challenge. It's actually easier if it's a really, really strong culture and they're acquiring a small company that doesn't really have culture, right? Because then you kind of fuse into the mother brand, right? But if it's two very definitive and strong-willed cultures, that gets tricky, and it could be a challenge for a lot of companies. We were fortunate. Tenuity acquired us. They have a fantastic culture, and I'll tell you the story of how they found us. We were very grateful. We fused pretty well, but there's still little things that would come up that in the big scheme aren't big deals. But for some folks on the team, it's like, well, we used to do it this way, now we're doing it this way. How do we kind of navigate that? So I think on that end, my advice for anyone doing mergers and acquisitions, if you're the acquiring company, you have to have someone dedicated on the team for integration, focused just on culture alignment. And that's one thing I don't see often with acquisitions, right? You need to have a team, not an HR team. The HR team's focused on administrative stuff, who's using what payroll system, et cetera. But you need someone just on culture integration and to liaise that and to make everyone feel good. But it's an interesting story. We weren't looking to get acquired. We were growing at 140% year over year, and just at the top of our game. And we made Ad Age's best places to work, number 2 in California, the top 20 in the country. And Ben Kirshner from now Tenuity just kind of reached out cold, said, "Hey, we should talk. We just got private equity funding, and we're out acquiring to kind of build this amazing super agency." And I originally turned down the call, but eventually we connected, and the visions aligned, and the rest is history. But if it weren't for that company culture and making that best places to work list, like, they would have never found us. They were seeking us out because of our strong culture, and they knew how valuable that was for just how we think about the world and how we approach clients and how we approach the team and take care of our team. So it's culture that ultimately got us acquired.
If you were to go back and ask employees what they appreciated most about being a part of the emailed aptitude culture in the company, what do you think they'd say?
Authenticity and no fear of kind of just being yourself and not knowing all the answers. So that was just a huge part of everything we were about. Like, at the end of the day, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We knew we were going to make mistakes. We were very transparent with clients on, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. And then internally as well, if someone's struggling, we support one another. So I think almost everyone would say I always had someone I could turn to with no judgment. We had no office politics in the traditional sense where, there was this gossipy, we called them jerks, no jerks, right? And everyone's just very supportive. We cared about each other and we supported each other personally and professionally. And I think I'd hope they would kind of appreciate that, but I'm sure that's something that would come to mind. And if they were part of the Camp Grounded crew, they would definitely have stories from those experiences as well.
What were there core values that you guys had, or pillars that you in the company?
Yeah, they evolved, and Joey put together this, really awesome culture deck. And, I think a lot of companies, they'll put together this, it's a little fabricated, right? They'll force in this deck, and here's our 7 values that we live by. But, we tried to be real about that. Authenticity, there's a couple other adjectives. And, we would try to fuse that in into talk tracks of, what does that mean internally for you personally? What does that mean for the company? What does that mean externally with clients? And can we be real? But at the end of the day, we want to be real. We want to do good work. We want to have a good time doing it and be honest about it. And that was kind of what we live by. Have fun, be authentic, don't take ourselves too seriously, and support one another.
I guess like you said, a lot of people have these values posted up in their office and at the beginning of all their all hands meetings. But how what ways could you really weave it into your day to day?
That's a good question, and it's been 5-6 years removed now. So, and at that point, it was a very different dynamic. But yeah, I think it would just be soft reminders, right? And so when we have an all hands, it might be, as we're explaining this company goal or what we're doing, we kind of tie that back into, what that means for the company in terms of values and how that supports everyone. And transparency was another one. And I think it's just very organic. If we're saying one of our values is transparency, then we have to be really transparent. So we'd be very clear with, here's where we're going, here's where our performance was, here's where we failed last month, here's what we need to be successful, here's what we don't know. So I think just being very organic and living those values from the top down, and then that helps everyone kind of evangelize those values.
How would you say company culture directly affects a company's bottom line?
Yeah, a lot of ways. So, in terms of employee retention, it's absolutely huge. So, and we were fortunate. I think our attrition rate was involuntary and voluntary attrition was like 2%, 1%. I mean, it was no one left. One or two out of 100. So yeah, I mean, it's so expensive to hire. It's so expensive to mishire, right? And find out it's not a good fit. So if you could have great culture, take care of your employees, that's just immediately impacting bottom line by saving on recruiting costs and just overall logistics of people management. I think a second way is just with clients, right? And depending whether you're selling a product online or your professional services, like if you have great culture and people genuinely love working there, that's going to ooze out onto their communications with clients, and that's ultimately going to attract more folks. In our case, it could get you acquired. So, develop great culture, make a couple lists if it's genuine, and who knows, maybe some agency will spot you. But yeah, definitely in terms of employee economics and client economics and client retention, it's huge.
Can you share some insights into your recruiting process? Any strategies you use to, consistently attract the right talent?
Yeah, depend on the role that we're hiring for. We never used outside recruiters, though, interestingly. And we're able to build that internally. I'm not necessarily against recruiters, but for us, it just, we moved so quickly. We just needed to kind of own that system. And we were so meticulous on who we brought in. So, depending on the role, we were always hiring for designers and kind of strategists. And, we were in a pretty niche spot, CRM management. So email, database, loyalty marketing for e-com retail. So there's only a handful of people experienced in that field. So in some cases, we were looking for, seasoned veterans on loyalty strategy. In other cases, and more often, we would look, how can we build an internal system that really trained folks over a couple of years, right? So let's get someone a little bit greener that comes in as a coordinator role, but is wickedly organized, just a great human. And then over a year or two, they're going to learn and they're going to kind of become that superstar and kind of learn how we do things. And we were really successful there. Some of our very early folks, started as, fairly entry level position, ultimately, went on to pretty much running the company now. So that worked well for us. In terms of the mechanics, yeah, we had, good infrastructure in place for reviewing candidates and kind of screening, and we'd have a pretty lengthy interview process. Mm-hmm. I was involved in every single interview up until maybe the last 5 hires. But before that, at least at some point in the process, I was involved. And I think that's one thing a lot of founders and CEOs, they'll start to slack out on early, but I think founders and CEOs, they have a sixth sense on people that are going to be good fits. And it's worth your time to spend 30 minutes having a conversation to just vet out and get that spidey sense. Is this person going to be a good fit? And then also kind of part of the onboarding process. I think that was another thing that I think was really, really important for us. I was on every single onboarding call. I personally onboarded every single employee and then would hand them off to whoever their manager was. And so then from the start, you're developing that rapport and you're able to set expectations from the top on where things are going. And I think that went a long way.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I recall a CEO being involved in my onboarding. Can you talk a little bit about the onboarding process? Anything different that you did?
Yeah, so if you were to ask, I'll throw out some names, Christine and Leah from the early days, it was, when we didn't know what we were doing, it was 10 employees. It was like, okay, let's start, let's go. There's the bathroom, there's the kitchen, and we would just kind of jump in. It was very chaotic, but eventually we got pretty organized, and yeah, we'd have, good structure. It'd kind of be broken down, of your HR onboarding of mechanics. Here's your benefits, here's your portal for payroll, all that stuff. And then we'd have the charismatic onboarding, which would be me, and kind of talking about company vision and getting them all riled up. And then it'd be kind of functional onboarding of, we'd have a buddy system. They'd get attached to a buddy, especially if they're remote, which most folks, so we were 70% remote, I'd say 30% in one of our offices. So you'd have a buddy system to kind of carry it through. But yeah, just depending on the function, we'd had a kind of a sequence. I forget what system we use, but the sequence process to get them up to speed with systems and operations, and then shadow a client, sit on, if it's a client strategist, sit in on client calls, have a mentor, et cetera. And then, another thing, this isn't part of onboarding, but, we did 360 reviews, and I don't know if at the time that was that common, but, we put a lot of detail into our employee reviews, and it wasn't a traditional, annual review. We'd have fluid reviews, but then we would have this structured time where, we'd get feedback from everyone you interact with.
That's 360 is getting all of your team and your management and
team management, but also clients in certain ways. So,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to provide feedback. And I think that's one thing, if you were to ask some folks, what was it like working at EA? There's probably a handful that would say it was the most meaningful review process I've ever had. It was all positive. It was the Ted Lasso of reviews, right?
Yeah, and that's what it should be, right?
Yeah. We'd be focusing on, here's opportunities to grow, and we'd have a couple slides on here, all the amazing words that people use to describe you, and just get them all excited. And here's some areas that we'd originally set as goals that maybe we didn't hit. So how can we work together to get better there and solve some of those challenges? So it was this very wholesome review process, something I was really, really proud of. It took a lot of time. We put a lot of time into our reviews. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing post acquisition. That's again, one of the 1,000 little things. Okay, we had our reviews this way, and now that you're part of a 300-400 person company, it's a completely different system for review. And so going from this to that, it's a transition. It's different.
What strategies did you employ to manage and maintain employee recognition?
Yeah. So we were on Slack, and so there'd be a lot of just kind of real time recognition, and that was a huge kind of part of our culture. Just making sure folks had public acknowledgement. And then we had, I forget the tool we use. I could get back to you on it. We had this other tool where it was kind of pulse surveys, and then kind of more structured recognition where you could to give someone this accolade, and then we would consolidate that either in their reviews or in kind of monthly spotlights, et cetera. But that was a huge part, I think, at all levels. And then on our big company all hands, we would throw people in the spotlight with acknowledgement, wow, Emily just did a fantastic job on this account this week. Here's what she did. So we'd try to have public accolades as much as we could, coming from me, coming from managers, coming from the team, just so they could share that good feeling with a lot of people watching. And then we would also do it in private as well. So I think it was 4 or 5 different things: a technical component, a small in-person component, and then a company-wide component, just to make sure people felt the love.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. One of my favorites I've seen is this company, one of my clients, Premier Nutrition. They have a big iron bell in the middle of the office, and they ring the bell, and that's one of their core values. And it was actually one of the things that came up consistently in my interviews with their employees. Was we'll ring the bell. It could be big sales. It could be a big sale, or it could be someone got engaged over the weekend, right. Just whatever, personal and professional. And
well, on the personal side, we tried to bring that out a lot as well, if folks wanted to share. So we'd actually start our company all hands with 10 minutes of, does anyone want to share anything unrelated to work, right?
I love that.
A good weekend, a bad weekend, did your daughter make the team? What was it? And some weeks it would be a little quiet, but then other weeks people would just totally bubble up and open up and share, and it allowed you to kind of get to know people on a human level versus just jumping right into, here's our quarterly numbers and here's what we need to do this week.
So how would you define work-life balance?
So I think what's tricky is it depends on the individual, right? And where they're at in life and what they're looking for. You could have so not having work-life balance for some people isn't necessarily this evil thing, right? If you're, I'm going to make up an age, but don't single me out for this age group. But if you're 22 and you're out of college and you don't have a family, and you're just wildly motivated to achieve whatever your goal is, and that's specific for you, you're going to have less life than you do work, right? And then also, if you absolutely love what you do, it's a little bit different. And so I think forcing work-life balance in kind of the traditional sense sometimes can backfire. That said, what we try to do is embrace, whatever's specific to you. And it's okay. We would have employees that weren't very ambitious. They wanted to do their job and be done. And that's great. They had no ambition to get promoted or to take over the world. That's fine.
Yeah.
But then we'd have some others that, they wanted to, what's the track I need to do to get here, whether it's a pay level or a title level or a prestige level, whatever it was. Great. Okay. That's awesome for you too. Here's what it's going to take to do that. So I think it's highly individual. At the end of the day. So now putting on my digital detox hat, yeah, I think everyone needs to have some balance to, focus on their mental health and their physical health. Now we're talking a little bit more about tech life balance versus work life balance. But in terms of work life balance, yeah, I think it's so individual to what you're doing, how much you enjoy doing it, and kind of what your goals are. I think from a company perspective, though, it's just important not to judge and to have different paths for different flavors, if you will.
All right. So, and as a video producer, I have to ask how your past company or your current company have harnessed the power of video.
So yeah, people don't know our story. Like Farron and I started a video production company in college, right?
Yeah.
And
you understood the value of video a long time ago.
We were pioneers in video. And actually, it was that experience that probably taught me the work ethic. I mean, we would stay up till 3 a.m. to make sure a video was perfect for a dance recital.
So a lot of those export and render times were a lot longer than they are today.
Right. So that taught a lot of kind of foundation. In terms of video at EA, let me think about this. We would do a lot with employee. So, I mean, we do a lot of live videos since people were remote. So, Zoom video conferences and stuff before Zoom was.
That must have had its own challenges because I feel like they worked out.
This was before anyone even heard about Zoom.
Right.
What Zoom. So we do a lot of that. We would, I think we would do kind of recorded video for new employees, kind of part of onboarding and stuff in some cases, but we try to have that a little bit more interactive. And then we were getting a lot into video for clients. We weren't producing video, but, a lot of our clients, for loyalty and CRM, like we would kind of help coach on the branding side of how do we kind of create this cohesive voice and then work with whatever agents they were working with on the video side. Transfer now to the digital detox side, and we're getting heavily into video, and the next couple of months even more so. And it's a little oxymoronic, if you will, digital detox, and we're focused heavily on video, but it's also something that allows us to bring people from different countries together. We have customers in over 80 countries, right? And so it's impossible for us to physically be everywhere, and video is something that could bring people together, bring a message together, and have people connect on a really meaningful level. So we're getting into a lot of different stuff, whether it's UGC, whether it's kind of video on the company side, more kind of behind the scenes stuff to really show that brand voice.
Great. And as we wrap up, I guess, what advice or key takeaways would you like to share? Anything else we didn't cover?
We covered a lot. I would say, for new founders, be very careful with hiring, right? And put on the lens of, is this an employee that I can picture being with the company for the next 30, 40, 50 employees if you're, small, right? And if the answer is no, don't waste the time on it, right? Like it's just, just the cost of rehiring and the downsides of a bad hire is so big. I'd say the next advice is, and it took a little time to learn this, if you're between two candidates, and of course, budgets are going to be different and you might not be able to do it, but if you're between two candidates and one is just an absolute superstar and one you feel pretty good about, and the superstar is just a little bit more and you could afford it, like I've never regretted paying more for the absolute best talent that's the best culture fit. Yeah, maybe in the short term, it's like, it's a little tight on payroll, but like the long-term benefits are just huge. So splurge on good talent and good company culture fits if you can.
Awesome. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Forrest. I learned so much and excited to have you here as our second guest.
Thanks for having me, Farron.
Awesome.